Hi, so on One Question this week, we're going to be talking about voice search. So, my name is Mark. I'm the managing director here at Primal. We're a digital agency based in Bangkok. And we've got a very special focus on helping brands here in Thailand grow as much as possible through digital channels. On a weekly basis, we take one question from our audience, our prospects, customers, and we pick the best one and we help to answer it. So for this week's question, we are going to be answering, how will voice search impact SEO? And how do we optimize this to set us up for the future in terms of our SEO strategies? Hey Siri, how long is a piece of string?
Check the display on your iPhone for the answer.
It says twice the length of the center to one end. That is the best answer. So I'm sure you've all been familiar with voice search. You may have used it on your mobile phone with Siri. You may have bought Google Home, in which you use your voice to interact with. So, voice search has been essentially growing since 2008 by 35x. So that's quite a high growth rate in which, it's raising eyebrows, it's capturing our attention. Is it something we need to be focusing on? In my opinion, it's something to focus on, but it's not the end-all be-all of your SEO strategy right now. But what we can do right now is start to think about the future and how we can potentially capitalize on this opportunity now. So it doesn't necessarily mean you always have to be the best at doing SEO to be able to capitalize this, but rather, be the first to start looking into it, potentially doing it, so that you're setting yourself up for the long term. Because obviously voice search is growing, and it's potentially something that could be helping your business in the future. So having a look at Google Home, Alexa, mobile assistants like Siri, we can see that 20% of all searches now are done by voice, mostly predominantly in countries like the US, and 40% of adults are using voice search at least once per day. I did a quick survey before with the team. I think we had 1 out of 30 people actually say that they use voice search on a daily basis. So just rough numbers, here in Thailand it's probably not as common. I think it's still potentially a little bit weird for people to be talking to their phone, but it's something that may be adapted as its usefulness grows, especially for Thai people. So when looking at voice search, we're looking at more conversational phrases. So, and they're longer as well. So, when we look at traditional SEO campaigns and we're optimizing for certain keywords, an SEO type key phrase, and I'll use the example that I used just recently. I was looking online to buy a pair of rugby boots. So typically I would type in buy rugby boots Bangkok, and use those results on the first page to then lead me to my final purchase on a website. I did stumble upon a website that was really cool, canterbury.co.th, a really cool brand. And versus some people that may not type in such short phrases to find what they're looking for. They might type in, let's say, more long tail phrases such as buy rugby boots online in Bangkok. This would lead people to potentially more refined results, because there's more context in longer phrases. And also, as an SEO, if we're optimizing for those keywords, we're capturing perhaps 70% of the other searches that are not big head keywords. But when optimizing for voice search, we're looking at question type phrases that one would use in a conversation. So an example in this case would be, where can I buy a pair of rugby boots online in Bangkok? ? So obviously these are much longer phrases, and it's not something you would normally put into a piece of content to optimize for. So how can we as SEOs really try to focus on these more conversational type questions to help us optimize for voice search in the future? So there's a few different ways. One thing that we can do, or the first step in optimizing for these type of phrases, is essentially speak to your customers. Have a look on what are their most frequently asked questions. What are the questions that are literally scratching their head daily in order to answer, with brands and your business? And really have a look at, forums as well. You can even potentially look into social listening tools to pick up where your brand is being talked about in order to gather as much data on what are the most frequently asked questions to do with your industry and your brand. And obviously prioritize the ones that I guess get asked a lot. You want to have a look at, the who's, the what's, the why's. And there's also this really cool tool. It's not available, or it might be available in the Thai language. I need to check. It's called answerthepublic.com. It is, in terms of coming up for ideas on what types of questions we could potentially optimize for, answerthepublic.com when it comes to English SEO is an awesome resource. I highly recommend it, especially if you're trying to come up with blog content ideas as well. It's worth checking out. You simply just type in a topic or a word, and it will simply list out a bunch of questions around that topic, for that keyword, drawing upon, various reputable sources for those questions. So once you've gathered some data, you've spoken to your customers, maybe you did a survey and you've identified, okay, well, these questions, probably the most important questions we need to answer as a brand. So, we could potentially be creating blog posts about these, and we potentially want to be creating content around these as well. So one of the most important things is that when you type in or voice search these questions, you'll notice that, or it's been proven that 90% of the voice searches that people have studied have on Google a featured snippet. So that's where you'll type in a question and it will automatically have in a box, we'll show an example here of the question and the answer taken from one of the websites on the first page. And you'll have a look that it's got the question and it's got the answer in that box. So when it comes to optimizing on the page, one intelligent step would be to write out the actual question that gets searched and also include the answer. So that's one good step to take towards answering that question, to actually put the question, as one would say it in voice search, into, let's say, the blog post or the page. So, that's one easy step that brands could be taking now in order to optimize for voice in the future. So I hope that's got you thinking a little bit about voice search, potentially what you could be doing now, in terms of how we can potentially optimize for this in the future. If you have any digital marketing questions that you'd like us to answer, drop it in the comment section in videos like this, and we'll be sure to pick it up in next week's video. So thank you for listening and for your time. Thank you.